All right, great. So we're jumping back into this little ditty about the NFT guide for beginners. We're going to talk about creating. If you're just jumping into this, there's a bunch of other videos in the playlist and a full video that I've compiled for the purists that just want it all at once. Otherwise, you can take it bit by bit. I've explained blockchain basics. I've explained NFT, smart contracts, the general gist of buying, collecting, trading, wallets, exchanges, etc. And now, if you're curious, I'll have a sip of coffee and wet my whistle, and we'll talk about creating. So looky here. Creating an NFT is actually super simple. It's way easier than you think, especially when you're talking about just specifically artwork. If you're going to go beyond the simple use cases of art, it gets a little more complicated, and we'll touch on that. But at the core of the art and collectibles aspect of things, if you are an artist, a designer, something like that, and you're curious how this could work, or if you're just generally curious how you could use NFT artwork and collectibles for your business as a promotional, item or a revenue stream, then the simple aspect is that there's, any form of art can be used. I know a guy who paints by hand, digitizes those paintings, sells them. I have a friend who is an illustrator, illustrates by hand, digitizes the illustration, colors in Photoshop. I myself mostly work in vector and pixel-based programs, do some hand-drawn artwork. I have other friends that do 3D modeling, rendering, and create NFT artwork as well. So really, it doesn't matter the point, right? It can be any form of artwork. There's actual NFT collections that are just text, believe it or not. To create them, it's just as simple as creating an asset. If you wanted to, you could literally create a cartoon in Microsoft Paint, save it as a JPEG, and you have the core element, because creating an NFT is all geared around the input types that are accepted. Image files, video files, audio files, these are common file formats that creatives are going to be familiar with and are going to be outputting. Those assets, those artworks, get attached to the smart contract, which we discussed earlier. And the smart contract is the rules and regulations, the licensing, the royalties, the payments, all the information that's related to the ownership, the provenance, and the rights to the artwork, right? Or the asset attached. Because if we extrapolate the concept and we go back to what we were talking about earlier, an NFT doesn't necessarily have to be art. It can be real estate. It can be intellectual property. It can be a supply and a supply chain, etc. The smart contract is what governs the asset. It's what talks about the ruling. It's all encapsulated in the NFT, right? To create NFTs, like I said, you can use a variety of different programs, the different input-output methods: Photoshop, Procreate, Adobe Illustrator, Figma, Affinity, Adobe Premiere, Adobe, Acrobat, maybe, Microsoft Paint, Blender, what have you. You can use HTML, you can use CSS, you can use Python, you can use R, you can use JavaScript, you can use processing, you can use all different types of programming language. There's many different ways to create the appropriate file format. Developing the smart contract is a little bit harder, but it depends on what your intention is. If you're looking to create a collection of items, and those collections of items are variations or generative formats, having a smart contract to deploy is key. If you're just doing one-of-one digital artworks, you can mint easily from marketplaces, but there are limitations to that. So it just depends. Honestly, you could write a smart contract for one-of-one if you want to. There's tons of different tutorials on how to do that. But we'll talk about that more in the next section on developing. And in all of that, really, just know that creating is super easy, right? And producing is super easy. The hardest aspect in any business is sales and marketing, which is why entire arms of corporations and companies are devoted to sales and marketing. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a ton of consistency. So you just have to be prepared to show up. The creation part isn't a problem, but if nobody wants it, nobody's going to buy it. And nobody knows if they want it or not if they don't know about it. So